with her next film, which I'm going to pronounce Primer, because that's how we do it here. I've heard it Primer.
Yeah, which is when we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, I was pronouncing it Primer. And I don't know why, because I just heard like Primer, like in a sort of maths context, being called that by academics and stuff.
I think it's an Americanism rather than...
I assume so, but then also it's primer as in, the starting of something, or like detonator cord and stuff and explosions and stuff. It's that primer. So it is primer. So yes, we're calling it Primer. And I don't know why I was doing that earlier. But so we're going to come right back to what I was mentioning a couple of films ago. While science fiction films can often be massively budgeted, effects-heavy monoliths, it is also possible to create a very effective film with not much more than a clever idea and a simple, in terms of technique and effects, execution, and certainly without a lot of money. And just how little money? Well, in the case of Shane Carruth's lo-fi debut feature Primer, about $7,000. So in film terms, that's not money. That's barely the biscuit budget for most films, It is frankly miraculous, especially given that it was shot in colour. For comparison, that's about 1/10 of the cost of Darren Aronofsky's monochromatic Pi, shot more than half a decade earlier. But Carruth's extremely careful storyboarding, almost unfeasibly low shooting ratio of 2:1, and a skeleton crew, with him taking on multiple jobs himself, more or less all of the jobs himself, allowed him to produce this gem that grossed nearly $850,000 at the box office. And that's not a bad return for $7,000. 4 friends, all employees of various tech firms, work in their spare time out of a suburban garage in Dallas, early Apple style, taking turns to try to develop different technologies in the hope of making it rich. 2 of these friends, Abe and Darren, collaborate on creating a machine that will reduce the mass of an object, in the first case a Weeble. Weebles wobble, but they don't weigh much, placed within the field it creates. It works, sort of, but like many of the greatest discoveries, the inventors aren't entirely sure at first how it works, and they're certainly even more perplexed when they discover they seem to have inadvertently created a time machine. Weebles wobble, but they fall through time. It takes not long until they decide that the smarter thing to do is to scale up and try sending something slightly smarter than a Weeble through time, to wit, themselves. And while they begin with the obvious things of using future knowledge to make gains in the stock market, and they at least attempt to avert paradoxes and the like, it isn't long until things go wrong and weird. This one is pretty strong sci-fi stuff. And I think I first saw this maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And I'm pleased to find I enjoy it just as much then as I did now. I'm also as massively confused then now as I was then. Even knowing what happens in this film, I still wasn't entirely convinced of what was happening at any given point in this film. Yeah. But I kind of like that, because this is a film which, I'm not saying I completely lost back because I was giving the film the attention it deserved. This is absolutely not one of those, just sit back and let it wash over you type films. You have to pay attention to it. And not everyone is willing to do that, unfortunately. But I think if you're willing to give it that sort of attention, it's really rewarding. It's remarkable that a film like this can be made in $7,000. It is willfully convoluted in places. And that is a deliberate choice on the part of the director. He wanted to have some of the audience's confusion mirror the confusion of the characters, because for large parts of it, they have no idea what's going on because they don't really know what they made, or how they made it, or how it works, just that it works. And it's actually kind of interesting too, because as well as being a time travel science fiction film, it also has a wee bit of a kind of believable look at how inventions get made, and that people don't really always know what they're doing. How many storied inventions and discoveries have come about purely by accident. On a second viewing, some of the mysteries hinted at during it don't work quite as well, because and I remember what happened, but still a lot of the twists are quite unexpected. And I don't know, it's definitely not a film for everyone, this. It is difficult to follow, requires a lot of concentration, but I just find it really, really rewarding. I like this film a lot, which is one of the reasons I was so disappointed by his follow-up, Upstream Colour, because I despise that film so much. But I find that this is a first-time film made on basically no money at all, with a crew of about 4 people.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable, and it's one of the most... Well, it's not rewarding, it's not quite the word I want to say. One of the most satisfying, interesting and different time travel films I've ever seen. And it's not like most other things. I mean, lots of time travel films have paradoxes and stuff, but this one feels like it approaches it in a very different way from a lot of others. Mm-hmm. But this is where you tell me you hated it, Scott.
I mean, I would probably recommend it based on my remembrance of watching it first time round, which was when I got to the end of it, I thought that was really confusing, but I liked it. And I thought, I'm not going to read anything about this film. I'm going to watch it again and get to the bottom of it. And then I never did. And then I watched Upstream Colour and I went, nope, checking out of this entirely. So this was the first time I revisited it, and I enjoyed it much less this time round. I'd remember it being puzzling all the way throughout, and it's actually not. I mean, the whole first hour of this is filler. I mean, it's well presented in a sort of technical way. And okay, maybe if you're interested in the sort of discovery of inventions, that kind of thing, you might get some joy out of it. I don't think I did certainly not second time around. I thought it was just filler. It's just an hour of technobabble. Well, that's more grounded in science than other comparable works. Probably, yes, but it still doesn't really make any difference. What I think crucially it doesn't do at any point in that hour is really get into the depths of any of the characters. And I think that's more noticeable this time round, because when I watched it second time round, I was trying to find some sort of motivations for the things that were happening in the last 20 minutes, half an hour sort of thing. And I don't think it really presented a case for that in any real regard. So that was a little bit disappointing. And then when it gets to the last half hour where things go sideways on a number of levels, it still didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then doing a lot of digging, I'm now convinced that it's actually just pulling things from its ass. When it starts talking about, actually what happened was there was another copy that went back another time round because they found another machine that was hidden in another location, in the 4th backup location. It's like, this is just nonsense now. This it's taken its premise a little bit too far, and if you did actually accurately map out everything that happens on it, it's just a whole bunch of nonsense. It's all internally consistent nonsense, I'll give it that. It all works within the frames of its rules that it's setting up. But I don't know, when you introduce the 4th version of something going through, I think it's just getting a little bit too willfully daft. It all works, but some of the events that happen at the end, I don't think are ever really explained for me in a meaningful character way in the first hour, and I found that a little bit disappointing on a second run through. So I was not rewarded by going back to this again. However, I can say that if you haven't seen this already and you're in the market for this sort of thing, on that first view, I was actually very intrigued, and was largely where you are with it now, more or less. So I would still recommend it, but for me, going back to it actually diminished the experience greatly. But that doesn't stop anyone watching it first time round.
I think possibly I even found it more rewarding the second time around, certainly no less. And because I was thinking more about the implications of what had happened. I
shall fight you.
Yeah, and I was thinking more about the implications too, and I was like paying a bit more attention to the dialogue this time. Because I know the basic premise, so I could pay more attention to that sort of thing. And what just made me regret was that there wasn't some sort of payoff scene that would have done, because really in the end it feels like there should have been a room like in The Prestige.
Yeah.
Because basically you get the idea when they start talking about what happened at the party, the incident at the party with the ex-boyfriend, and I thinking, yeah, that's the way he's talking, that this person hasn't just done this once. They've done it lots of times. So like, how many times has it been through? And it's like, So it's getting a bit somewhere between Groundhog Day and what you would have to, what Hugh Jackman's character had to do in The Prestige. And I'm thinking that's actually kind of dark. And I wish there's been a payoff to that, because that's the way it's like, you start realising what that character's talking about. It's like, okay, to get the outcome that Abe thinks has happened, this has gone through so many iterations, and that just means that there's a lot of rats in the attic. Whereas the end of the film is like, I honestly, that's the one thing, I'm not sure if I like the end of the film or not, because okay, I know who this person is. It's the person who's doing the voiceover from the beginning, and they're making a giant one, but why?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's meant to deliberately be a mystery. It's like, what's the end game of this? I want to know. But maybe that's deliberate. Maybe it's supposed to just pique your curiosity and not do anything more. And I thoroughly enjoyed Primer both times I've watched it, but in slightly different ways, because I came away with a different feeling about it the second time.
Yeah, so did I, but it didn't really help matters. Well, this time around, it just felt like one of the characters has gone from a normal guy to a sociopath off camera without really explaining a great deal of it. And I don't know, that maybe there's some satisfaction in coming up with your own story as how that happened through the various machinations that the film presents. But for me, it kind of didn't. And, I was not that invested in it this time round.
I thought some of that was explained, but actually, I think it is explained, because they do talk about basically if you come out of the box too early, it's going to fry your brain a bit. And that character does come out of the box slightly too early, whereas there's another character who they determines come out too early as well, and his brain's toast. So I don't know if it's just that affected the person, therefore affected their decisions. So I'm trying to talk around this, because I really think it's best watched without knowing too much about it. But it's quite hard without just like saying what happens. I think this film, as well as the film we're going to finish with, is the one that perhaps is the one best left untalked about in terms of specifics, to get the most enjoyment out of it. But it does make talking about it very difficult.
Even with my comments, I still, as I say, if you've not seen it at all, it's definitely worth watching. I can't give it an enthusiastic recommendation this time round, but I still do have to recommend it, given on my first instance I enjoyed it quite a lot.